What's up, everybody? Peter Coffer here. Yep, open up another line of inquiry, another sub brand. And if you've listened to my music or, some of the branding episodes, I'm a funk guy. So this is called Nothing But the Funk. Gonna look at the funk. There's been some history on the funk, but not as much really is. And the funk ain't going anywhere. I think really, if you look at today's music, the two most influential uh, musical genres, in today's music, I mean, obviously the blues is there because the blues goes into the funk, but you know, getting away from the roots of you know American music, which is, kind of permeated around the world, and that's rockabilly and the blues. That second generation is disco and funk. And I call them, they're not identical twins, they're fraternal twins because they share a lot. So this is called live performance. I think I have 10 here, but the funkiest moments in human history. And here's the ground rules, as people like to fight. I'm talking about performances that were released to the public officially as either CDs or records, or there's now, I mean, there's a lot of stuff, um, on YouTube that folks record and then throw up there. So these those are the ground rules that had to have been officially released, and so most of this is not in order. I usually subscribe to the that great is great, and it should try to discern what's greater than this or that is kind of hard. But in this, I mean, one does stand out, and that's the first one. And I'm going, straight to the first one. James Brown, Love, Peace, and Power. This is recorded at the Olympia in Paris, France in 1971. It wasn't released until 1992. Two guitarists in this concert and two drummers. I don't know of any other funk, James was famous for using two drummers, and that's one reason why James is James. I don't know if P Funk ever did. I know Sly didn't. Interestingly, I saw Ain't Too Proud to Beg Broadway on tour. So in Lansing, Michigan last summer, and they were using two drummers as well. So it's one way to having two drummers is one way to really funk it up and with your drummers was, and James asked a lot of everybody. So, uh, if you're asking a lot, sometimes two drummers will help on that. And certainly in today's music, if you were going to try to take hip hop on the road with a real band, you would probably have to use two drummers because the drum machines still are pretty complex compared to back in the 80s and 90s, and so you need two drummers, and plus maybe a drum machine on top of it to really do it justice. So, but here's what makes this album great. There's Live James before and Live James after this album. What's different here is the band, and specifically you got Bootsy Collins on bass and Bootsy's older brother Phelps Catfish Collins on this album, and Jimmy Nolan, that was in the band right before, is considered the father of funk guitar, and he is. But man, Catfish, he kills it on this, and he shows his skills. He's an amazing guitarist. Even with Bootsy and with P Funk, he wasn't able to, but James let him do his thing and really let him stretch out in this. And Catfish and Bootsy were only with James for about 18 months, and then they hooked up with George and P Funk, and made their own history. Um, So interestingly enough, I mean, so they come out of Cincinnati and uh, I think it was King Records. At this time, James Brown was headquartered, his base of operations was Cincinnati because he was with King Records. And, the band, his old band, I think it was, yeah, the JBs, because the Famous Flames were before. And the JBs were upset because they didn't think James was paying them enough. And James got tired of the bickering and fired him on the spot and hired Bootsy's and Phelps's band and brought him in. There was a couple holdovers from the JBs, and it was kind of Bootsy talks about it was kind of uncomfortable because Bootsy's folks looked up to the JBs. Obviously, I mean they're local legends and whatnot. But it only lasted 18 months, and then because Bootsy and his people had that little wild streak, and James wasn't going to have that real long. So, and of course, George was like, do your thing. Hey, I'm down for whatever. And I think many of the JBs came on after, the inevitable happened and James fired Bootsy and his folks. But, the standouts in this album, you want to talk, listen to the Catfish's guitar and brother rap. That's the second song in the album, and then that last stanza with "Get Up, Get Involved" and Soul Power. So James on this album has some of his older pre-funk stuff on. That's what I call the original R&B era. Please, please, please me, and that kind of stuff. Which that stuff is good, but that's not honestly that's not why I listen to James. Um, but Super Bad is on this very good. Give It Up and Turn It Loose, and Sex Machine and Boots and Catfish, they played on, in the studio and played on Super Bad and Sex Machine. And Get Up and Get Involved and um, Give It Up and Turn It Loose and Soul Power. So they were in the studio for all of those songs. So yeah, that's number one, by a mile. When the best funk ever put on wax, so to speak. Number two, the famous P-Funk, the Beverly Theater concert. So P-Funk All-Stars, and it's been these two standouts. I mean, the concert is good in general, but this is Los Angeles, California, live at the Beverly Theater, 1983. And so, but Flashlight and Atomic Dog, they kill it. And the version from this has been, from this concert has been put on 3 or 4 other live P-Funk albums. I mean, when you're hitting, you're hitting. But the whole concert is the live at the Beverly Theater. It's now only on YouTube. You can get James's Love, Peace and Power. You can still get the whole album on the streaming services. Yeah, but no, this album is only on YouTube. But I think it was released in the 90s. I didn't see it beforehand, but I think it was in the early 90s when it finally was released. And man, you know. They re-released the Flashlight and Atomic Dog on different, versions for a reason because it's hitting. It's hitting. So number 3 on the list, it's gonna be a beautiful night by my man Prince. This is off of the Sign of the Times concert movie. Man, the funk is hard on this. Prince jumps on the drums. The only other version we have with Prince playing the drums is um, America. That live video from the mid '80s that hit and disappeared for a long time until Prince passed away. So this is again Prince on the drums. I think he's a little better on the drums and here and it's going to be a beautiful night. Interesting, so this is kind of a hybrid recording because, putting this in the Prince history, he went over and did a European tour in '86. Um, but then he did Under the Cherry Moon, the movie, and a terrorist attack was happening throughout Europe at some of the airports, and so he canceled the U.S. tour. And so he wanted to put something out. So he did, you know, record some of his European concerts, but was not thrilled with some of the quality. So this is interesting. This is a hybrid album, so to speak, live stuff mixed with studio. And this is what off of Purple Rain. I mean, that's what happened with Baby I'm a Star, and Purple Rain was supposed to be live, and ended up it wasn't. But Baby I'm a Star is a hybrid off that album too. I mean, it comes off of a First Avenue show he did with the Revolution. So number 3 on my list, Bootsy put out a live album, Keep the Funk Alive in '95. And then now this is out of print. You can't get it on the streaming services, but this is also available on YouTube. He did drop the CD in '95. It was recorded in Tokyo, and Bootsy's hitting it. I mean, it's funny because, George will take a 3 or 4 minute song and make it into 20 minutes. And, Bootsy will take a 4 or 5 minute song and turn it into 2 minutes. But Bootsy likes to do medleys. But the highlights in this album, the Pinocchio Theory, Hollywood Squares, Bootzilla, but Stretchin' Out. I mean, that's the highlight. If you go and you listen to my, you know, episode on the funk where I talk about the one. I mean, the beginning minute 90 seconds of this live version, he's hitting the one hard. The whole band's hitting the one. Also, I mean, I'd rather be with you. I mean, not funk, but hey, it's a classic song, and Bootsy kills that as well. So, yeah, so that's my take on this album. It's a good one. My next performance is again Bootsy, and oftentimes when you see these lists, there's only one entry for an artist. I wanted to get the best ones I'd ever seen, and hey, you know, Bootsy hit the list twice. I ain't mad, so I'm gonna roll with it. And it's a version. This is on YouTube. This one wasn't released live, but it was sort of released live. So I'm going to let this one slide because you got to hear it. But Bootsy played Saturday Night Live in the late '80s, and he did Stretchin' Out. So yes, it doesn't totally, you know, uh, my criteria, but it was publicly put out there for, in a public venue for the public to partake of. But Bootsy kills it, Stretching Out. He has a guest, he plays with, so it's Bootsy, his band, and Paul Schaefer. And he brings in the jazz guitars, and it's, he kills it. It's amazing. And this is on YouTube, so just, type in Stretching Out SNL and it'll pop up. So I'm gonna, I have James, by himself. I'm gonna do a group, and that's that second group is that second tier. And this third tier is pretty good too. But, let's go. So this next tier, the Ohio Players, they did I had to search and find this, but this was it's a live concert out of Atlanta called Old School, and I picked this up, in the early '90s, at a gas station. When you're on the highways and the gas station, they have those $5.99 cassettes back in the day, and this is one of them. Now it's $5.99 CDs. It's not on the streaming services, but it is on YouTube. And, the two standouts is Skin Tight, but Fire, they just tear Fire up. One of the best intros ever, I think. But other stuff on that is good as well. So, so that, yeah, that would be, that's next on the list. And the next one in this tier three, the Commodores Live. And what the standout, I mean, they have different, I Feel Sanctified and Brick House. Brick House is the funk, and they got the percussion section and that breakdown between I Feel Sanctified and Brick House. And going back to Bootsy for a minute in the SNL, I mean, he has a percussion, is different than any other live version I've heard of Stretchin' Out. He has a interesting percussion set going on for the SNL cut. Next on the list, this is on the streaming services. Kool and the Gang live at Montreux 2009. Now, I'll be honest with you. I ain't mad at Kool and the Gang for getting, going in and getting paid after, post Ladies Night, Cherish and Joanne and that stuff. Yeah, but just like, I don't listen to James, I'm not, I don't, sweat James's stuff, before the funk, like I do the funk. I'm not really, kudos for them getting paid for Joanna and, Cherish, but look, these dudes can still funk. I was skeptical when I started listening, but yeah, these, so Jungle Boogie, Open Sesame, Get Down on It, Ladies Night, those are the standouts, live at Montreaux in 2009. I was skeptical going in, but I shouldn't have, because, listening, I remembered Kool and the Gang, their early 70s stuff before they, went into funk disco. They were a jazz band. And so shame on me. But yeah, this is some funky stuff. And remember, the JBs and James Brown, went to the jazz ranks to get people for his bands, uh, from when he started touring to the mid to late 70s. So, that's why James was James, and he had great bands, and he was a great live performer. He had great musicians, and P Funk's the same way, and Boosie's the same way. So, apologies to Kool and the Gang, but they tear it up in this album. And then finally, Cameo, they have, it's on the streaming services. It's called Fresh Takes from 2018. And they do a good job with their stuff. Probably the best one, where they really crank the funk to a different level is Keep It Hot. But, I know Cameo gets some flack for some people for stripping the band down in the 80s, but everybody stripped the band down in the 80s. I mean, Kool and the Gang went down, or Earth, Wind and Fire, they stripped it, I dealt with this on an episode. I can't remember what episode it was. I think it may have been one of the funk episodes, but, Earth was one of the Prince episodes. But, when folks, when the 80s came around, I mean, on MTV, you couldn't brand off of 15 guys. So you stripped it down. That was part of it. The other part was just technology wise with drum machines. You didn't need as many folks. Prince got rid of the horn sections, and you look at all the R&B acts from the 80s. None of them had, because they were using the synthesizer brass. So, the bands kept some of those, guys back, from back in the day, but they were hired help. I mean, and it goes back to that old adage, you know, um, you know, from the 80s on, there was a tiered pace. The songwriters got, X amount of money, and everybody else got some, and, some of them ended up being just hired hands. But, that's, and, you know, whether Prince comes along and with the Lynn drum machine and and the use of the synth brass and someone else would have come up with that. So yeah, the 80s were the downsizing of bands, particularly in R&B and B and funk. Um, so yeah, that's my that's his first inaugural episode of Nothing But the Funk. So I'm going to do a couple um, classic funk albums that have kind of slipped through the cracks. I'm also obviously going to, jump into some funk songs. But the one thing that'll be unique to this line of stuff that I do is I'm going to, at some point, take these funk acts and do my top 10. Or top five, depending on the bands, and throw them out there. And for some of them, I mean, there will be, look, the Isley Brothers, it'll be, there'll be some ballads in it, but yeah, the Isley Brothers are a funk act. So I know people like to fight about their top, but I mean, hopefully it'll be friendly, and what we can, friendly disagreements on, the top songs of all time for the Commodores, or Earth, Wind and Fire, or the Isley Brothers, or the Ohio Players. So thanks for coming through. I got my 5 albums on all the streaming services, and it's here on my channel. And check them out. I got also 2 science fiction fantasy novels and a novella on uh, Amazon under the name Peter O'Coffer. So I appreciate it. And see you next episode.